Nice to see you, those that are there. I'm just getting rolling, so hang in there, folks. We will get rolling in just a minute. The good news is that tonight, let me turn my volume off on my own stream. There we go. All right, here we go. The good news tonight is that I will have commercials turned off. And that is kind of cool. It's kind of fun to be able to do that. So I will be having no commercials tonight. And many of you have probably already figured out we've got a guest tonight. But before we get to the guest and the chit chat that we'll be doing, and I think you're going to enjoy that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. One of the things I usually do is, frankly, the first thing I do is try to give you a little bit of an update on the channel, but I'm not sure we're going to get to that first thing today. But the first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to be letting everybody know, or I'm letting you know now, there will be no commercials, except for one. There's going to be one. That's it. I've turned monetization off, and I know my guest has as well, who a bunch of you already know who that is, I think, because you're waiting for him. But and the reason there's going to be no commercials tonight is because I have a sponsor for tonight's video. And I'm going to be sharing that sponsor here shortly, but it is just 5:30. So I like to give a little bit of time for folks to join us before we get to that. And then I also think that I'm free tonight to give out a bunch more memberships on the channel. So if you are one that likes to see what goes on behind the scenes, I will be giving out some memberships tonight. They let you give out 10 a month. And I think it's been a month and a half since I've done it before. So all right, where are we at here? I think we're probably good enough to go. So what we're going to do tonight is, first of all, I got a story to tell you, and I think you're going to want to hear it. I do polls on my community page, and one of those polls was about myself and General Gray, and I was a corporal in the Marine Corps. So I've agreed to tell that story tonight, which it'll take me a few minutes. And then after that, we'll bring in our guest. But before I do, I want to go ahead and run this little spiel for our sponsor tonight. And again, we will not have any commercials outside of this one clip, which is a couple minutes long. And hopefully you'll endure through that, because that makes it a lot easier for me to not have commercials on stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let that go. So let's sit back. Let her rip.
You get inundated with spam texts, spam calls. Spam's insane these days. I got to tell you, I certainly have. And I know the reason why we get so many spam calls and texts. It's because big companies can't keep our data safe. And it hasn't even been a few months since they admitted that over 70 million of their users' social security numbers ended up on the dark web. The stolen logs also contained every number that an AT&T customer called or texted. So even if you don't have AT&T, and I don't, but I do have friends and family that do, then your number has been exposed. So what can you do to protect yourself? Well, I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura will alert me if they find that my phone number or any other sensitive information has been compromised. And folks, in the past, I've had a problem with that. Heck, who hasn't, right? I mean, everybody knows about identity theft. Well, I've had some trouble with that myself in the past. Thankfully, it didn't end up costing me a whole bunch of money or destroying my credit, but I do know people that have had that happen to them. I got lucky. I had a competitor of Aura's at the time. They're not quite like Aura. Aura is like them on steroids, and that's why I switched to Aura. And they give me fast fraud alerts in case anybody wants to try to use that data to access my credit or bank accounts. Aura does so much more to keep me and my family safe too. I also get things like transaction monitoring, a VPN, antivirus software, parental controls, which I no longer need, right? But you might, and identity theft insurance. I get this all in one app at one affordable price, which frankly is quite competitive. I also get their AI-powered call assistant that will pick up unknown calls on my behalf. The AI forwards the legitimate calls to me so I don't miss, appointments, deliveries, emergencies, all the important stuff. And it protects me from harmful text messages by filtering out known spam numbers and scanning links in the messages for phishing threats. I'm not leaving my family or myself vulnerable to data breaches, and you don't have to either. You can go to aura.com/theoldjarhead and try it out 2 weeks for free. Check it out, folks, and thank you, Aura, for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get to it.
All right. Well, folks, Appreciate you sitting through that. And thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this video tonight. And folks, again, without them, I'd have to run mid-roll ads. And I'm glad I don't have to do that. So no more dealing with turning off the mid-roll ads and all that crazy stuff. We're done. Let's roll. Now, okay, so I alluded from the start that I do these polls on my community page. If you've never seen them, just go to YouTube, the Old Jarhead, you'll see them. And one of those polls, one of my most recent polls was, I'd have to think about, it was like, what do you want to know about? And one of them, the one that won most, about 70% or more of those who took the poll, which was about 60 plus people, was the General Gray story. So just for those that don't know, General Gray was the commandant of the Marine Corps when I was in the Marine Corps probably the last 4 years I was in the Marine Corps. I was in for just under 5.5. And General Gray, awesome guy. He actually fought at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in Korea during the Korean War. I think he was a sergeant then. And just an all-around amazing Marine, my favorite general of all time, frankly. But so how did some lowly corporal end up with his arm around the commandant of the Marine Corps? That's the top general, right? That'd be like somebody in the Army putting his arm around the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff or something like that. So how does a corporal get to that point? Well, it actually starts when I was a PFC. And I know Mark Davis is on with us tonight. So say hi to Mark Davis, who just put out 1986 to 93. So, I have to think about that, Mark. PX Kelly was before that, but Mark Davis actually served with me in then Light Armored Vehicle Battalion, which later became Light Armored Infantry. And no, folks, this live stream is not just about the Marine Corps, but I'm telling this story because you asked. In any case, as a private first class with Bravo Company, I want to say 3rd Platoon, but folks, it's been an awful long time. We're going back nearly 40 years now. I had been assigned to go out with my platoon to do a dog and pony show for Norwegian royalty. So a dog and pony show, that's what we call them, was when the Marine sends out units to show off what we can do to dignitaries. In this case, we did an entire Marine Air Ground Task Force, landing assault on the beach and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it was amazing. It was a good time. And nobody volunteers for those, by the way. You get voluntold. But afterwards, we were staged in a big field. And as a scout, even though I was a mechanic, I always laughed that I was a scout with a toolbox. But as a scout, the scouts had to stand on line outside of the vehicle, and the vehicle commander, gunner, and driver stayed in the vehicle. So you have to picture this. You've got this light armored vehicle with 4 Marines standing beside it, and this huge show going on. And at the time, there was a Harrier jump jet flying backwards across the field. It was amazing because I'd never seen a jet fly backwards before, right? This was my first. And I hear the vehicle commander start clearing his throat and coughing in the vehicle behind me, despite a Harrier jump jet flying not that far away, right? But I could hear this. And I'm thinking, what is wrong with this guy? Well, that's about the time I got decked. Yeah, decked, as in punched. I got hit so hard by somebody from behind me that it knocked me down pretty much, not flat on the ground, but almost. I went down on one knee and one hand. And as a Marine, I came up swinging because, I'm not going to let someone knock me down. So as I'm coming up, fist ready to go, right? I'm coming up. I'm going to deck somebody. And as I'm turning around to see who decked me, all I saw were the 3 stars. I think it was 3 at the time because I'm pretty sure it was Lieutenant General Gray, the 3 stars on his collar. And let me tell you, if you've ever come out of a punch and gone to attention faster than that, I don't know how you did it, because I came out of swinging to standing tall and straight as fast as you can imagine. You can just imagine a PFC about ready to deck the Lieutenant General. He was the Fleet Marine Force Atlantic General at the time. So here I am trying to recover, and he starts laughing. And of course, General Gray, if you've never met him, I'm sure Mark has. I think you said you met him twice. He was short, squat, bow-legged, tough as nails, always had a big chew of tobacco in his mouth, cussing and swearing, spitting on the ground. That was General Gray. So after I come out of this punch and I go to try to stand at attention, all he does is he spits on the ground, big spit at you on the ground. He goes, "How's my Marines today?" And then he stood there and talked with us for at least 15 minutes. It could have been longer. At ease. How's my Marines today? Aren't these things a bunch of bull crap? Oh my God, I hate these things. We should be out training or doing something fun, right? That was General Gray. So the next time I met General Gray, and again, we're going to get to the story. Well, this is the story, how I ended up putting my arm around him. Let's just say I got to know him. But the next time I met him was when we were supposed to meet Colin Powell, General Colin Powell. We were doing a live fire exercise out on the live fire range. And I don't know if we had the 90 mics out there or the 120s, but it was around that time. I don't know, Mark, if you remember that. But we were doing a bunch of testing with, it was normally an LAVs, an LAV 25 millimeter chain gun. But we were actually testing them with 90 millimeters as well as 120s. And one of those times we were out at the range and Colin Powell came to meet us all. And honestly, he had an entourage like, I don't know, the Queen of England or something like that. And he just breezed by us all. I mean, his nose was too far up in the air to really know who we were. And he wasn't about to sit down and talk with us, that's for sure. So once he got by, we were told to go ahead and hit the tree line. Well, hit the tree line means literally go sit down in the tree line and, eat some lunch and smoke them if you got them and whatever, and take a break. So we hit the tree line and we're cracking open some good old MREs, yum, right? And all of a sudden, here comes General Gray. Hey, you got a gorilla cookie? Anybody got a gorilla? Who's got a gorilla cookie? God damn, I like those gorilla cookies. What are you Marines doing today? And that was General Gray, right? So he ended up hanging out with us for another 15, 20 minutes, just BSing the whole time. Now, you have to bear in mind that Light Armored Vehicle Battalion at the time, which now today is called Light Armored Reconnaissance, but that was General Gray's pet unit. He started it. It was his baby. So we got to see him a lot. Well, the last time I got to see General Gray, see, I'm getting to the point here. The last time I got to see General Gray was in Desert Storm. So it was actually Desert Shield at the time. And we were painting vehicles. So we shipped out to the desert with all woodland camouflage. We didn't have any desert camouflage. So when we got there, we had to actually paint everything, which if you know anything about carc paint, we're probably all going to have cancer at some point because the stuff's bad for you. But that's what we were doing. We were painting vehicles. And one of those days when we were out painting vehicles and taking a break and standing around and we used to call it cussing and swearing and spitting on the ground, along comes a Humvee. Now, Humvee, everybody knows what those are, but it was a high-back Hummer, and it had the commandant's flag on it, or flags. Now, that's 4 stars in the Marine Corps. There's only one 4-star general in the Marine Corps, and that is the commandant of the Marine Corps. That is the top dog, number one. Ain't nobody else higher than him except the president, right? So General Gray, his vehicle pulls up. Now, I didn't see who was in the vehicle. All I saw was a vehicle pull up and a bunch of stars on the flags. And as a pretty salty corporal at that time, I wasn't too worried about it, but you do kind of wonder what's going on. And normally what would happen is, under any other general, the driver would get out and the driver would go over and open the general's door to help, and then the general gets out. That's how it works. Not with General Gray, not at all. So Hummer pulls up, the driver's sitting in the vehicle, doesn't get out, and all of a sudden, General Gray comes walking around the back of the Hummer and starts opening up the back of the Humvee. Now, you got to understand, this is not normal. This is not what generals do, right? I mean, you know how those commercials where you have like people talking about some senators never paid for gas in 30 years or whatever, so he doesn't know how much a gallon of gas is, right? Well, that's a general. They don't drive, they don't open their doors, they sure as hell don't carry their own luggage, and they damn sure don't open up the back of a Humvee. But here's General Gray opening up the back of the Hummer, and he looks over, because we're all still sort of in that stunned, like, what the heck's going on here state. And he goes, "Hey, you Marines you want some Cokes? You want some pop? You want some chips? Let's come on over. Help me get this shit out of here." So, of course, right, what are you going to do? You're going to jump too, right? Get her done. Get over there, help him out. And then our lieutenant comes running up. Well, the lieutenant should have known better, but I guess he just He was a lieutenant, right? They don't really know. He comes up and he says, "Oh, General Gray, do you want me to let the colonel know that you're here?" General Gray looked at that lieutenant. I don't even remember that guy's name anymore, but he looked over at him and he said, "Lieutenant, don't you think that if I wanted to see your," and I'll leave out the expletives that he used, "colonel, then I'd see your colonel." And he just looked at him and he said, "I get the hell out of here." Said a whole lot of other things that I can't repeat here, or I'd get banned on YouTube probably. But in any case, chased that lieutenant off, and we all stood around BSing with General Gray, drinking pop, eating chips, having a grand old time. Now, again, you got to understand, he was a Marines general like none you've ever heard of before, I'm sure. Like Chesty Puller. If you could, obviously never met Chesty Puller. I'm not that old, but man, I'm telling you what, maybe General Gray was cut from the same cloth. At some point, one of the Marines who was there said, "General Gray, can we take our picture with you?" And he said, "Sure, absolutely." "Yeah, hell yeah. Let's go." So the guys started getting up there beside him, and they'd stand at attention, and they'd stand at parade rest, and they were getting their pictures taken. And I looked over at my buddy Shay McCracken, and I said, "Crack, you still got that little camera?" He said, "Yeah, I got it." I said, "All right, listen to me a favor. I'm gonna go up and get my picture taken with General Gray, but don't take that picture until I have my arm around him." And McCracken looked at me and he said, "Ain't no way in hell you're going to go up there and put your arms around General Gray. Are you out of your mind?" Well, I guess I'm out of my mind, because I walked right up there, and when it was my turn, walked up to General Gray, put my arm around him, had a big old grin on my face, and so did he. And Shay took the picture. And if you've been to my community page, you've seen it. That's the story of my taking my picture with General Gray with my arm around him. Now, I should add that General Gray was with us, and he was often several miles in front of the lines with elements of light armored infantry at the time. So much so that Schwarzkopf used to yell at him and get mad at him because generals weren't supposed to lead from the front, I guess. So Marines that knew General Gray, Mark Davis is on here right now. I've seen some comments in the chat. Those that knew General Gray knew that he was an absolutely fantastic general. And honestly, I miss him, and I didn't even know him that well. So awesome guy. Okay, there's your story, guys. Now, I hope you enjoyed that. Drop some comments in the chat there. I do see a bunch of chats, and I will try to get to those. But first, I told you we had a guest tonight, so I want to go ahead and bring on our guest. Now, I got to tell you, before I bring him on, you've heard me talk about him in a lot of my videos. You're probably watching, even right now, many of you are watching from his channel, so I probably don't need to introduce him, but I've got Michael Wilson here, so I am going to pop him up on the screen. Hey, Michael, how are you? Notice I'm not calling you Mike anymore either, because, I don't want to get in trouble with your mom.
Yeah, she doesn't watch the live stream, so you're probably safe here, but I wouldn't chance it. It's not worth the risk.
I'm not going to. So, folks, I actually invited Mike. See, I want to call you Mike. I invited Michael on. We've actually gone back and forth over a lot of things over the years. And I say gone back and forth, that's probably give you the wrong impression. We've talked about a lot of things. And maybe one of these days I'll even get him up to show me how to fall trees. Because frankly, if you ever watch me fall trees, you probably have a heart attack. But we've had a number of conversations, and of late he's been getting into some solar power stuff, and I've been talking to him a lot about that. And when I mentioned my live tonight, he said, "Well, I probably have some questions for you." And I said, "Well, you know what, Michael, I'll tell you what, why don't you just join my live tonight? You can ask your questions direct, and we'll just have a BS session, and we'll probably talk about some other things, because he just did a video that, if you haven't seen it yet, go and watch it. And Michael, I'll have to have you put tell me the title of it, because I don't remember, but it's about our forests and forest management. I've done the same kind of thing myself in the past, and I really think that's an important topic, because too often folks think that the way to manage forests is to not manage them at all. And they think that that makes them natural. And I have argued and argued and argued for a very long time. And for those that don't know, I grew up in logging country in British Columbia. I'm from Oregon. In fact, Michael and I think, were born in the same hospital. But you Grants Pass, right?
Yep.
But so we're brothers from a hospital. There you go. But I'm a little older. He's my younger brother. But anyway, I've talked a lot about forest management, and so we'll probably get into a little bit of stuff like that tonight, maybe even some sawmilling, because my channel is about all of those things. But first of all, what was the title of that video? Do you remember?
I had to look that up myself. I didn't remember. Preserving our forests is destroying them.
Yes, thank you. And when I saw that, I was like, I didn't even need to watch it. I knew it was going to be a good video, but I did. That's a great video. So thank you for putting that out. I keep trying to put that same thing out myself. So, but before we get into questions, I want to do a quick look at the comments real quick to see if there's anything I missed before we get going. Mother Guns. Yep. That's the one I'll never forget, Mark. So Mark Davis is here. He served with me back in the day, almost 40 years ago. So good to see you. Oh, that was the years you were at the battalion. Okay, yeah. So you were there 86 to 93. I was there 86 to 91. So we're brothers from the same battalion. Make it look new. Okay, a lot of comments by Mark, guys. So if you're into comments, bear with me as I do a quick run through back during our LEV test. LEVs over the berm, 2 cables out, 45. Okay, lots of comments there. General Mattis, long before General Matt. Oh, yeah, even more badass. I agree. Okay, that's all about General Gray. Great story. Good neighbor was there. Air Force also. I get stories all the time. Cool. Okay, that's all the comments I see. If you've got questions, folks, don't be shy. Throw them out there, and I will definitely try to get them answered for you tonight. But first of all, Michael had some questions for me, so I hope you wrote them down.
I did. I wrote them down. I recently got into solar. Actually, that's not true. I've had a 100-watt panel for 10 years. I know enough to be dangerous. That's about all I know. I know to have a panel. I know to have a charge controller. I know to have a battery. But I need to know some of the questions on how to not be dangerous. Questions like, I hear about putting fuses in between components. Where do I need to put fuses in?
So I'll tell you, outside of big systems. So bear in mind that there's solar and then there's solar, right? So for small cabins, I'm not as big on fuses, though that is a kind of a relatively new thing to me. My day of doing solar, I mean, I started building my solar 14 years ago, and fuses were not used at all that I know of. Certainly not in small systems, but breakers are used, and I personally think still should be used. So a quick note on fuses, they're commonly used regardless in series panels. So a lot of times, especially on big arrays, that's lots of panels in series, they will fuse each panel so that if a panel shorts, it doesn't take out the whole array. In my case, my panels are 2 in series and 3 in parallel on my big array up on the roof. If you haven't seen my channel, because you're over on Michael's channel, check it out. You'll see I've got some videos out there for that. And then my panels on the ground are 3 in series, and I did not fuse those. Is it an issue? Well, the 3 on the ground have been there since 2010. Never had a problem. So are they supposed to be fused? Will Pros would tell you probably if they're in series, you should fuse them, but I've certainly got away with it. But what I do have is breakers, and I'm a big proponent of breakers. So if you run your solar panels to a breaker box, typically those are combiner boxes, though the point of a combiner box is to take multiple arrays and run them parallel to one another. So parallel is positive to positive, negative to negative. And you might do that if you had, for example, I have 3 on the ground, so 615 watts of solar in one array on the ground. If I wanted to add another 615 watt array with the same panels and everything basically the same, then I could just run those into that combiner box to a second breaker, and boom, both of those panels will now feed together. So that's the main point of a combiner box. But the truth is, my lower set of panels, the ones on the ground, I just have one array going into that combiner box, but it goes to a breaker. And that breaker is set for the amperage of the panels. So it's a 20 amp breaker. That gives it plenty of extra because they're only shooting at about 11 to 11 and a half amps. I probably could have got away with a 15 amp breaker, but I put a 20 in if I remember right, though it was 14 years ago. So that does a couple things. One, obviously, if things get a little crazy and you get over amperage on there, a big zap or something, a short or something else, it's going to trip that breaker and save the rest of your systems. The other nice feature is I just did, 2 changes to my system this winter. I had to move my whole system into a back room to protect my LiFePO4 batteries from the cold. And it was really nice to be able to just flip that breaker, kill the power from the solar panels, and I ain't going to get zapped now. And then recently, in a video that's upcoming, I put in a new charge controller on that same set of panels. So again, I was able to just kill that breaker. Boom. That de-energizes everything, and I'm safe now to use it. Now, the other places you want to have them is you want to have one from your charge controller, and you want to have a main disconnect. So the best main disconnects that I know of are made by Midnight Solar, and I'm not affiliated with them at all. But I have Midnight Solar combiner boxes as well as Midnight Solar DC disconnect boxes. And how those basically work is you got one great big breaker. In my case, it's a 250 amp breaker. So it's a monster. That is where your batteries run prior to going to your inverter. So it's basically between the inverter and the batteries. You've got this big breaker that is designed to carry all the amperage you could possibly draw off of those batteries. Now, I'll be honest with you, today, I'm probably under breakered for what I'm doing, but I'm never really pushing my system so I can get away with it. But the reason I say that is I have 3 LiFePO4 batteries that all can take 100 amp draw. So that's 300 amps, and I'm breaking them with a 250 amp breaker. Probably a little under breakered there, but worst that can happen is the breaker trips because they try to push the system.
Would you want a breaker between the charge controller and the battery, and one between the battery and the inverter?
Yes, and the one between the battery and the inverter is the big one. What's that?
Basically between all the components.
Yes. Yeah. So if you look at a Midnight Solar combiner box, and if you look at my videos where I show that in the back room, you'll see there's a great big breaker on the right-hand side of that big flat box. That's the 250 amp breaker. Then down on the bottom is another couple breakers. One of those is for one of my charge controllers. The other one was a second breaker for my panels that I really didn't need. So normally what you'd have is a breaker on your panels, a breaker for your charge controller, which you'll find inside the combiner box, and then your main battery to inverter breaker inside the combiner box as well. If you put those 3 in, you can not only isolate and de-energize each segment of the system, but you provide all the protection that you need, right? Over amperage from your charge controllers, over amperage from your batteries, or over amperage from your solar panels. And of course, in your cabin, you should have an AC box, which is all your AC breakers for your 120 volt side, right? Same thing.
On the other side of the inverter.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So this combiner box, does that have multiple breakers in it?
Yes. And so you can get them like
a breaker in there between the charge controller and the battery, a breaker for between the battery and the inverter. No.
That's the disconnect.
Those are separate units.
That's the disconnect box. So you have 2. You have the combiner box and the disconnect. The combiner box is to combine solar arrays.
Okay, that's on the array side.
Yes. Yeah. So if you look at any of my videos on the outside, you'll see there's a couple boxes on the porch on the outside. They're just little boxes like this big. And those are combiner boxes. And they usually have, so they've got common, they're common past the breaker, meaning that you have one wire, well, 2, one positive, one negative, coming from your main disconnect box going to that. Then from there, they go to your solar panel. So for example, I have 3 solar panels that I run in series. if I wanted to run them in parallel on separate runs, I could run the cables from those panels to that box. And then as long as those breakers are on, then they would be parallel to the charge controller, if that makes sense.
Okay. Speaking of panels, can you run different panels in a system? For example, my 400 watt, 100 volt panel, can I put parallel to that my 100 watt, 19 volt panel somehow?
So yes and no. My advice to anybody wanting to run different types of panels is to run separate controllers. Then you're fine. Yeah. You can, I know that there are more technical solar channels out there that talk about how you can parallel panels of different voltages or different amperages, different wattage. You essentially lose in doing that because they're going to go to the lower common denominator. So it's not really advantageous. You're better off, in my opinion, just running another charge controller. And with charge controllers coming down in price the way they are today, it's would be that, and that's what I do now. So if you look at my cabin today, you'll see I've got those 6 panels on the roof, and then I've got 3 panels on the ground. So they're 2 separate arrays, different voltages, different amps and wattages, and they each run to a separate charge controller. And there's a big advantage with that. One, if I need to turn one off for some reason, I still have the other one working. Or 2, if one trips, which I have had happen, it's no big deal because the other one's still running. So you have a lot of advantage.
Do you have those different charge controllers going to the same battery bank?
Yep.
Do you need to isolate that in any way or just hook them directly?
Just with the breakers that you already are going to put in anyway. Yeah.
So you'll run, sort out what electricity's going to who.
Yeah. So the way they work is they have charging ramps built into them. So it essentially, one charge controller is going to look at the battery bank and say, I need to get my batteries to whatever, 29 volts. So it's going to throw it into boost charge and get them to 29 volts. If the other charge controller is also doing that, it's just going to get to 29 volts faster. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you're just increasing the amount of charging, and you can have multiple charging sources. So you could run 2 solar arrays and a generator and a windmill and run them all at the same time.
So maybe it's like a tandem bicycle. You got 2 people pedaling, you're going the same speed, but one's pedaling harder than the other, but that doesn't really matter.
Yep.
It still goes the same.
And if one quits pedaling, you still keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it looks like I have a really bad sunburn, it's the lighting. I look like a lobster here.
Nah, no worries. You're probably you're not in your normal studio office, so
then anyone else feel free to ask questions, otherwise I have more.
I see Roy Robinson says yes, breakers not fuses, also a disconnect switch. Yep, agreed 100%.
Disconnect should be between the components.
Yes.
Just between the controller and the battery, and between the battery and the inverter.
Yes.
You need one between the charge controller and the panels.
Well, that is your combiner box.
Okay. That's
so your combiner box. Yeah. And I mean, if you don't put in a combiner box, then you can do a breaker in your disconnect box. So like in my case, I do have a spot for a breaker in my disconnect that if I wanted to, I could run a solar array right to that. I like doing it separately in a combiner box, and they're not real expensive. Last time I checked anyway, they were pretty inexpensive. I did a video on simple do-it-yourself solar power system, and I listed all the components in there. So they're pretty inexpensive. But there is a question for you here. Let me pop that question up. Can you see that one? Do you see it?
That one for me on the probably for the range.
I think so.
I'm just experimenting right now with those batteries. I just got 2 more. What I want to do with those batteries is set them up just to use this summer. Then I'm going to go back to where the sawmill property is. I'm going to take all that and set up a more permanent system there. That's where I really want to use those eventually. And I do want to expand it. I just don't know how much yet. I'm experimenting with those batteries to see how much I need to run the Starlink, to run a little
Did
refrigerator, keep
you
the lights on.
did you
I,
get that download that I put up for you?
I
You
may have,
forgot. You forgot about it, huh?
probably.
I put up a spreadsheet for anybody that doesn't know. If you go to manlyportablemilling.com, that is my actual website, though I'll probably need to change that because I'm
Yeah, I
not
did
running
get
that.
that one.
You did get that one?
I just don't know how much the refrigerator is going to use because I don't know how much time it's going to spend on. That's going to depend on the weather. I don't know how much the Starlink's going to use because it
Right,
depends on how
right.
you're using it. I'm just see how long it takes to run a battery down, and I think that gives me a better idea.
Like that refrigerator that I have, it uses about around 50 watts per hour. And so you can kind of, depending on the size of the fridge, like what I did, excuse me, and this is by the way, I had a fantastic dinner tonight. My wife and I, for the first time, made smoked jalapeno poppers, and they're wrapped in bacon. And then she also did bacon wrapped potatoes. So if you see me constantly going like this, it's because I probably ate a little too much tonight. But it was good though.
Yeah. As good
Anyway,
as far as the family ranch, since it belongs to a whole bunch of family, I don't want to set anything permanent up there. Who knows what the fate of that place is? But ultimately, I want something portable to take there that I can take back to my place when I'm done being there. For now,
okay. So in that case, you don't want a stand-up fridge. You want a portable. Now you bought a Dometic, right?
yeah, that one has a freezer compartment on one side, a refrigerator. Well, either compartment can be either,
Like
and
mine then.
that's enough for me and family
Yeah.
that's coming in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's so I've run those. I've run one of those. In fact, I'm trying to think right now. I want to say that after over 24 hours of running mine in 90-degree weather on a 1,000 watt-hour power station, I still had power station left. Like they don't really use a lot of power. I mean, obviously, when it's really hot, they use more. But the way I figured mine out was, and it's pretty close. In the case of mine, it has a battery. So they say it's a 6-hour battery, and I just divided the watt hours of the battery by 6 and said, oh, it uses 28 watts per hour. And or 28 watts. And that seemed to work pretty well. So you should be able to figure out from that Dometic, it's got to have something on there somewhere that tells you what the draw is.
It tells what the draw is, but it runs for a while, then it shuts off.
Yeah.
It's not always going.
Right. Well, you could do like me. You can. What I would do is, you have a power station or not right now?
I have a little power station that I can run it off for a little while, and I can find out that I ran it off that it uses about 60 watts or 50,
Okay.
40, 50, maybe average 50.
50. Okay, that's like
Yeah.
mine then.
But
So if
that's
you
not 50 for 24 hours a day. It's only 50 while it's on, and then it shuts off, then it's not drawing hardly anything.
right, but
I don't know how much time it's going to be running versus just sitting there, so it's hard to calculate the wattage.
right. Well, that's
With
what I would.
100 amp hour LiPo 4 battery, I got about 2.5 days out of it.
There you go. Okay, so that answers your question. So all you got to do then is divide that by 2.5 days worth of hours, and you know what you got.
Yeah, I'm letting the battery help me do the math.
You know what? That's one of the reasons why I've done some of those videos myself. I'm working on one right now where I ran a new Agritech power station, a little 1200, so 1,000 watt hours, 1,200 watt inverter, and it was hot. I mean, brutally hot. I was running my 75-liter refrigerator all weekend on it, but I did have to charge it up periodically. So, it won't run it more than about 24 to 30 hours on that 1,000 watt hour battery. And that depends on, like you say, temperatures and everything else, how often you get into it, how full it is. But yeah, so if you don't have things you can put in a calculator, that makes it a lot harder, because that's kind of what you need to be able to do. I'm always preaching that, right? Like, number one is figure out your watt draw. Then you can figure everything else out from there. But the way you're doing it is why I'm doing some of the videos I'm doing, right? Like, let's just throw a battery on a power station and run a refrigerator all weekend and see if it works. Why not?
What I found out is I can run that, and I can run Starlink on 2 LiPo4 batteries and a 400-watt panel without a problem.
Mhm.
My concern now is what is it going to be like in cloudy weather and in the winter?
That's what the generator's for. Unfortunately, you know, and I think actually in my video I put out Thursday, I talk about that a little bit, and I have many times. The sun don't shine 24/7, 365. I mean, unless you're in the North Pole in the summertime, right? I mean, you know, that's why we got to have generators.
Or throw a generator in the creek.
Well, if you've got a creek, which you've got, see,
My
you can.
thought is we got sun in the summer when the creek's low, but we have high creek in the winter when there's no sun.
So micro
So I would
hydro.
have to run that for about 200 yards cable from the creek to the batteries.
Well, if you could do some trenching, you could run the water to 200 yards and have running water at your cabin.
At the ranch, yes, but this will be at the other place
Oh,
where a trench would have to go way up on BLM land to make that happen.
yeah, that's not good.
They would
Yeah,
get mad, I think.
yeah,
They don't have
that's
a sense of humor.
the only other thing you could do. Here's a thought for you is, and I'm just spitballing here, and hopefully you all, those of you that are watching, if you want to chime in, absolutely chime in, because that's all we're doing here. But what about setting up a micro hydro at your creek with a doghouse, a movable doghouse for BLM or whoever?
Charge the batteries down there.
Have an extra battery, charge the battery at the creek, and swap them out.
That's a solution.
You know, because I mean, honestly, these LiPo4 batteries, like those watt cycle batteries, I've got one as well. They're so light that it couldn't be a big deal to haul one or two up there.
I could carry 2 in each hand almost.
Well, you carry that chainsaw around all day like it ain't much. So, you know,
those batteries would be nothing.
Yeah, right.
Or I could set up a zip line so I can, well, that's getting
now you're talking. I mean,
I can ride myself. Oh, that's getting complicated.
Anyway. SM Aggies. Hey, buddy. Nice to see you. Like to see you out here. You say you do enjoy electricity. I would use those certain DC solar fuses. Have sold them and see users. Have seen used before. Converter, not an expert. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people go to the fuses. I personally just don't like them because I like breakers. To me, I like that switch, click, click, up, down, way you go. Micro hydro with a question mark. So, cool. I'm glad you asked that, because, you know, sometimes I forget that maybe nobody's heard of these things. So micro hydro is where you actually take a miniature turbine that can fit often in maybe a 2-inch pipe. And you can set those up in creeks, streams, anywhere you've got enough running water to give you a little bit of head. And those little guys put out quite a bit of power. And I've seen them, you know, like a 500-watt micro hydro. The thing is, with micro hydro, it's 24/7, 365, unless it freezes. So unlike solar, that you only get, you know, 4 to 5 hours of really good production in the day, approximately, depending on where you're at. Micro hydro is 24/7, 365. So you can get a lot less production out of micro hydro, but because you're going to get it for 24 hours a day, it adds up. So you think of it this way. If you have a 2400-watt solar array and you get 1 hour of sunshine, that's equivalent to a 100-watt micro hydro running 24 hours a day. That's pretty crazy.
I'm wondering, at the ranch, we have a gravity-fed system from up the hill, out of the creek. We're running sprinklers all the time. If I put a little micro hydro generator in the line, how much pressure and volume is that going to take away from the water system?
Theoretically, none. Right? I mean, because all it's doing is spinning a turbine. So you're going to have some loss, but it would be
some resistance to the turbine.
Yeah, but that's all you're going to lose is a little bit. And depending on how much head you've got on the pipe, you know, if you've got 50, 60, 80 feet, right? Every foot.
It's more than that.
Yeah. So every foot of elevation is worth approximately half a foot of or half a pound of pressure. So if you had 60 feet, you got 30 pounds of pressure. So, and that's what matters with sprinklers and water pipes. And by the way, folks, I have gravity fed water pressure at my cabin. So I had to figure all that out at one point.
If I fixed the holes that the cows knocked in the pipe, that might account for that extra pressure.
They're almost as bad as bears leaning against your solar panels.
Oh, yeah. Now, someone told me a long time ago, I can't remember if it was a dishwasher or a washing machine pump. Take that, run the water through it backwards, you have a generator. You ever heard of that? I looked for it online and I could not find that.
It's, I mean, you can do all kinds of, the trick with generators, as long as you've got something that can generate a specific range of voltages and amperages, then you can control it with a charge controller. And that is, so a lot of people don't understand what a charge controller is, but when you look at a solar panel, they'll often tell you it's a 12-volt solar panel and it's 100 watts. Well, 12 volts is just nominal. It doesn't mean anything. It's really going to be an 18 or 20 or 22 volt panel or something like that. And the wattage is based on peak, absolute, perfect, sun's hitting it exactly straight on at just the right time of day at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's when you get 100 watts. So a charge controller's job is to take whatever power the panels are sending it, whatever voltage and whatever amperage, and to take that and essentially condition it to get it to the right voltage and amp that your batteries need to get your charge on your batteries. Because your solar panels are going to put out, 20 watts, or like my panels on the roof, right? I've got 6 panels. They're all 36 watts, essentially. They're called 24 watt panels, but they put out about 36. And I have 2 of them in series. So that's 72 volts. I said watts. I meant volts. I do that. So bear with me. 24 volt panels, Eric. So anyway, so I've got 72 volts going to the charge controller, and I've seen them come in at 20 to 25 or 30 volts, barely putting out a half an amp. But then the charge control takes it and it says, okay, I need to give 29 volts. So I'll step that down to 29 and I can give 1 amp or whatever. And that's what it does. So you would just need to do that. If you found some other source of generation, you'd have to find that, where it would fit best and make that work.
Those pumps, they're supposedly DC motors. You run a DC motor backwards, you have a generator.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. You would just need to figure out what kind of voltage it gets, because that's the number one thing, right? When you figure out a charge controller, it's based on volts and amps. People always talk watts, and it drives me insane because you actually have to know the voltage and the amperage of your solar panels or anything else you're using to charge your batteries and what your batteries actually need and can take. And that's all volts and amps. So what are the questions you got? And folks, if you got questions, drop them in the comments below. Even if you just want to say hi. And frankly, we don't know who we're talking to unless you say something in the comments to say hi. So we've seen a few. Darren Hutchison. I have a relative whose name is Hutchinson, and they're up in Canada, by the way. Atu Rohala, I hope I pronounced your name right. Roy Robinson. You know what? I am related to a Roy Robinson who's in, I want to say Tennessee. So if you're in Tennessee, I'll be blown away. SM Aggies, we got Black Smoke Joe. Who else do we have? We have Mark Davis, and I don't see anybody else. So folks, Gorilla Radio is on. That's it. So if anybody else is there, be sure to drop comments or say hi. Let us know where you're at. And if you want to know about sawmill stuff, forestry stuff, neither of us are primarily off-grid power channels. I'm more of an off-grid channel. Michael's kind of forestry / sawmill, chainsawing, all forestry stuff, and a little off-grid.
Very little.
Did I get that right?
Yep, you got it right. I have more questions.
By the way, he's only a few hours from me. So one of these days we're going to get together.
More than you can count on 2 hands, but a few hours.
Yeah.
Hands and we need a few toes.
But 12 hours probably.
12
That's the
hours.
thing, right? You think, oh, we're in the Northwest. It's a
Yeah,
little
we're in the
bigger than
north.
people realize.
We're on different ends of the Northwest.
Yeah, no doubt. What else you got?
Okay, got him here on the phone. Okay, I have a charge controller, 50 amp charge controller.
Mm-hmm.
That was 50 amps. Is that on the total amps or is that on the solar panel side or the output
Usually
side?
when they rate a charge controller, it's rated for the solar array. So
Okay.
that would mean a maximum of 50 amp input, and it's probably like 150 volts. So that would be a max of 150 volts and a max of 50 amps.
And it's a 24 volt, 24 volt controller. So if I wanted more, I could put more voltage on the solar panel side and get more watts.
So even though it's a 12 or 24 volt controller, that's for the battery side, but for the input side, it should have a maximum voltage.
That means I can step up my voltage on the solar panel side and get more watts.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So let's say you have 150. Is it 150 volt? Is it a Victron?
Victron 12, 24 volt, 50 amp.
Okay. Should tell you the maximum input voltage too.
Okay.
But so let's say it's 150 because that's pretty common. Yes. Then yes, you could crank up your array. And the closer you get to that, the better, but you never want to get to all the way to it. And so the rule of thumb is give yourself a 25% buffer. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is when it gets really cold out and your panels happen to be perfectly aligned, they're actually going to put out far more power than they're rated. So you don't want to set up a 150 volt array with a 150 volt charge controller. And then on one cold winter day, when it sends 170 volts to that charge controller and fries it, you're a little upset. So I'm running my TriStar MPPT is a 45 amp charge controller with I want to say 100 or 150 volt max input. And I'm hitting it with about 60 volts and 11 and a half amps. So I'm way under the max. And then I have an Outback FlexMax 80 that's an 80 amp controller, and I'm hitting that one with about 30 or 40 amps and about 72 volts. And that's been running like that for 10 years. It's running fine. And the Morningstar's been running for 14 years. I did just replace the Morningstar. There will be a video coming out. Should be out this week on replacing that unit. So that should be fun. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
And by the way, we've got 1014 Tomcat, which makes me think that you're a pilot from Alabama. Hi from Alabama. Hi, I hope that means it up in the air. Mississippi Homestead Journey. I've been thinking about microhydro. I have a creek and a stream. We've got Squinian 74. G'day from Pakenham, Ontario, Canada. G'day makes me think you're from down under. And then we've got Kathy Dickerson, LT40 hydraulic owner in Louisiana. Awesome. Love my LT40 hydraulic. So for those that don't know that I'm a Sawyer, so's Michael, by the way. And he's afraid of me bringing my LT40 down to Southern Oregon because he's afraid if I do, he's going to want to buy one.
I'm mostly afraid I'm going to have to sell all that lumber somehow.
Well,
when people aren't really buying it.
There is that. So we've also got David Leonard from Alabama, new here. Well, nice to see you, David. Glad you're here.
And yes, I'm afraid I'm going to want an LT40. You got me.
We've got Roy Robinson, Apple Valley, California. Had an on-off grid system for the past 4 years. I also own a dog, and sorry guys, I'm getting old, dog rescue called Critter Ranch. Oh, cool. By the way, speaking of rescues, I assume, Michael, you've been to Wildlife Images out of Grants Pass.
Yep.
I haven't been there in years, but my mom actually used to live not far from there on Azalea Drive. And I've been out there a few times, and I wouldn't mind getting out there again if it's still open. I'm guessing it still is.
Last I heard it was, what really wigged me out about that place is they had this cougar display. They had an injured cougar and a perch up about 20 feet. And they said that injured leg cougar can jump up 20 feet to that ledge with no problem.
Yeah.
I'm out with those animals every day out in the woods who can jump 20 feet onto a ledge when injured.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder.
You know, I've seen bears do things that people can't even imagine. I lived in a little town called Port Alice, British Columbia. And Port Alice is near the northern end of Vancouver Island. If anybody's ever seen the show Alone, where they take 10 contestants and they go out and they have their 10 items, and whoever can live in the woods the longest gets to win or whatever. Well, the first couple seasons were filmed not far from Port Alice, where I used to live. And in Port Alice, there was no dump there, right? So this little town of 1,500 people in a pulp mill. And what they had was they had a chain link fence with concertina wire. That's the razor wire around the top, all around these dumpsters. And you would take your garbage there. And then on garbage day, the garbage trucks would go to that facility and pick it up and leave. And right on the outside gate, it says, close the gate as soon as you enter or exit this facility. And the reason is if you left the gate open and you went in, we can all figure out the bears would come in, right? Well, that's no big deal. But when you get in there and you look at the dumpsters, you know, Dipsy dumpsters, and they have claw marks in the steel. You might think I'm crazy. I'm telling you, a bear can literally rip a door off a car. They are insanely strong. They're also incredibly smart. And yeah, I do the same thing. I actually chased a bear. I swear to God, I'd have 1 billion views on YouTube if I actually had a camera with me when it counted. my wife says, "You're a terrible YouTuber." He didn't have a gun or a camera. But I went out to change the settings on my hot water heater, which happens to be in the back room at my cabin. And so I had to go back there, open up the back room, and go down inside the room, turn the hot water, adjusted a little up or down or whatever. And it was right after doing a bunch of milling and a bunch of dirt work. And so I was just covered in sawdust and man glitter, right? And so I took my shirt off and I was like, you know, before I jump in the shower, I need to go adjust this hot water heater. So I go out to the back and I go to open up the back room and I look to my left because I caught something moving. And there's a bear charging up the road. There's a little old skidder road. He's just charging up the road straight at me. And he's not 20 yards away, right? I mean, not even, probably 10, 15 yards max. And of course, what do? I yell at him, right? God, get out of here, right? Make yourself big, loud. I'm a big old loud jarhead. So
did he see you, or is he just running in your direction?
You know, I have no idea, because when I looked and saw him charging up the hill, I just started yelling at him, and then he took off, which they generally will do, right? I have been in the woods much of my life, and a lot of it in British Columbia, because the way I was born in Oregon, I was actually raised in British Columbia. We moved to a homestead in the 60s, back in 1967. And we literally lived on a quarter section in an A-frame turkey coop converted to a cabin with the bears and the wolves and the cougars and everything else. Been around them all my life. I've never actually had to shoot one because it was thinking that I could be breakfast, but I have scared them off with firearms before, because they sometimes get a little too curious, or maybe a little too territorial. Black bears are very territorial. But yeah, that one time, if I'd have had a camera, I'd have been golden, man. But I didn't have a camera with me.
I got lucky that day that I saw that bear digging up the yellow jacket nests. I got that all on camera.
Yeah, that was beautiful. That was actually really cool. I'd never seen a bear do that.
Probably.
What's that?
Once in a lifetime thing, probably. That's the only bear that I've run into that didn't just run away the opposite direction.
Yeah, I've had them. I've been followed by wolves. I've crossed paths with cougars. And you know, I carry a sidearm. Carry one all the time.
I do too.
And you know, I sometimes say it's because I'm an old jarhead, but I grew up in the woods, and you know, the people that get attacked are usually the ones that are alone, which you and I both are a lot when we're out in the woods. Mm-hmm. But the lone ones that get attacked are the ones that don't have something to defend themselves with.
Yeah. We got a new question here.
Yep. We got a couple there, it looks like. First, we've got, let's see. Oh, SM Aggies. Looks like he must have just subscribed to you, Michael. So cool. Right on. SM Aggies is a great viewer. You watch all my videos. I see Squintin 74, Port Allen. Oh, Powell River. Oh, okay, right on. Very cool. Yeah. No, I actually, my sister was in Powell River. She's now in not Camel River, but Comox, I think. Comox or Courtney or something. She's a nurse up there. But and I have a sister and a dad in Nanaimo too. Big Valley, LeSueur, Minnesota. We just had mountain cats just attacked, killed 3 steers. Claim they jumped 15 feet. Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then looking to set up an old style farm windmill. Would love if it could charge a deep cycle battery for lights in a remote barn. Do you know of anyone selling such units? You know what? That is a great idea. I would look for. That's a good question. I'm trying to think about this because you'd almost be, if you were doing 12 volt, you could almost just do it with an alternator probably. But there's got to be somebody selling turbines, but they usually sell them with the wings, basically, right? So, and I'm thinking as I'm talking to you here, but yeah, I think I would look for a generator with. Boy, that's a good one. I haven't heard of that, and I would honestly, I think what I would do is I would go into some of the forums. You could go to the Country Plans website and to their forum. There's an off-grid power group there. There are some really smart guys in there that still check in from time to time that have done some crazy off-the-wall stuff. You know who else you could check with is find Will Pros on YouTube. See if he knows. All he does is solar power type stuff. He might have an idea though, and I think I would check with Will Pros for that kind of thing.
If there's
That
not
would
a
be my
small
advice.
windmill product available, that might be a good entrepreneurial venture for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Here's a good one for you, Michael, because they know I do.
If I'm not carrying a chainsaw, I'm at least always carrying either a chainsaw or usually my G19. I'm usually carrying something. A
Redneck.
shovel at the minimum if I'm fixing water bars or something. But
Semper
yeah,
Fi,
I'm
Devil
almost
Dog.
always carrying.
Oh, Florence, we got it. We got someone from Florence there.
Florence,
town.
Oregon, I'm guessing.
I'm guessing too. Love
Beautiful
Florence.
place.
We've got Northwest Montana. What we got here? Winco, La Center, Minnesota, sell power heads. Oh, there you go. Power heads and motor driven units. Thank you, sir. There's your answer right there. That's why we do this. That's awesome. So it makes me wonder if like a ranch and home type place might usually, especially if you get out into the countryside a bit, I don't know where you're at, but I'm in an area that it's about 300,000 people. So it's kind of a city here. It's funny. If you watch my channel, you don't know that because normally I'm at my cabin, which is 20 acres in the middle of absolutely nowhere, or I'm in my shop, which that was the commercial tonight. If you came in late, the reason why you're not seeing commercials is because we do have a sponsor tonight for tonight's video, and I'll pop them up right here. Aura, I'm not going to talk about it a whole long, but if you missed that part, thanks to Aura, we and it's in the description too. But anyway,
I think they have windmills for pumping water. I wonder what would it take to take one of those and turn it into a generator.
Yeah, I would think that you'd be able to do both.
Maybe even just a car alternator.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. That's what I was thinking. If it's 12-volt system, the problem with car alternators is that they're not really set for LiFePO 4s. But what you could do, I mean, it would be a little complicated. You could use a car alternator and a buck converter, pump it up to 24 volts, and then run it into a bateria, little 10 amp charge controller. That could work too.
Is it easy to step the voltage up?
Yeah. Yeah, because LiFePo 4s generally need a much higher voltage because they're, if you look at a LiFePo 4 voltage ramp, it's way higher. They'll hold their voltage almost till they're dead. So like a 24-volt battery bank, they'll be sitting above 26 volts way until they're sitting at like, 80% discharged before they start to really drop.
If I put a LiPo 4 on my dump trailer, am I going to have to change the charge controller? Or is that even a good idea?
You would have to change the charge controller on it, yes. Here's a great example. Excuse me. You know how, as a YouTuber, you guys all know we get offers for things to review them. And so we get batteries to test out and try out. And one of the things I know Michael does, and one of the things I do is I try to be brutally honest about what I review. I've literally thrown things away. I'm going to be honest about it. But we get those offers. And I had some offers on batteries that I've been turning them down. Occasionally I agree to it. But I started thinking I should put a couple in my camper because I've got a nice Arctic Fox 990 camper, 10-foot camper, slide-in type, right? But to do that, you will never get those LiFePos fully charged using the standard controller that's in the camper. You've got to pull it out and put in a new one for $270 that has the correct voltage ramp for LiFePo 4s. Now, the solar on the roof, it'll do it. But if you plug it into shore power, it's not enough. It'll never get them fully charged.
Will it harm the battery?
No, I don't think it'll harm the battery.
It'll
never fully charge it. That's the problem. And so what you'll have is you'll have a battery that, let's say you have a 100 amp hour battery, you may never get it past 80 amp hours. So you're already starting, already discharged a certain amount. So it's generally not a good idea.
If it's charging to 80%, it might be usable on a dump trailer, though.
It could be. I mean, you could certainly try it. If it were me, I'll tell you what I would do. I would do one of two things. I would either get a Bateria, a little, and I'm telling you this, I'm going to be doing a video about Bateria soon, but that's not why I'm telling you about this charge controller. So just to be clear, yes, Bateria has done a video with me, but no, I'm not talking about that charge controller. This one's separate, but they have one that I personally bought on Amazon for like $35, and it's just a little 12-volt charge controller. I think it could take 10 amps, and it allows you to take that foldable solar panel that you can't actually use all the power of with, say, a Jackery, 550 or whatever, and it allows you to use it all to charge up a battery. And I would probably do that and make sure that battery gets topped off, every week or so, or two or whatever. And then the rest of the time, just charge it with whatever way you normally charge. And I would either do that or I would buy one of those inexpensive, battery maintainers chargers off Amazon that you could charge it up with. And then when you're running around in your truck, it'll get a charge. It just won't be fully charged, if that makes sense.
You can top it off with the other thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. We've got old units were called Delco wind generators with water batteries. The heads can be found at swap meets. Okay, good to know. You're obviously somewhere out in the farm country because a lot of people don't know that stuff. Controlling the RPM for overcharging is the hard part. That's why I think as long as you have a charge controller, you'd probably be okay. You may need to, that's somewhere where I would probably put a fuse in, because if you get into some heavy wind and it starts to push beyond the limits of the charge controller, that could get you in trouble. Or put in a big enough charge controller that it can handle it. But I could see that being an issue. Newer ones have wind and voltage cutout. Oh, there you go. There's your answer. See that? Look at that. I love, this is an awesome audio. You guys are fantastic, by the way. So keep them coming. Let's see. I used to use deep cycle batteries from a trawling motor. They lasted pretty good. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I have been using particularly a little LiFePo 4 battery made by Cycle and Bat that's about 2/3 the size of a standard, Group 31 LiFePo 400 amp hour battery. So it's really small. I've been using it for my trawling motor, and I bet you that I could trawl for days with that thing. It has so much power, and it's lighter than those old lead acid batteries. So honestly, I think I've got a 20 amp hour battery that I probably could do all I need, because I don't spend all day on the water.
Is Glorified G talking about lead acid?
Somebody, yeah, just Glorified G here just said he used deep cycle batteries for his trawling motor, and they last pretty good. It's true, they do. I just like my Lifeboat 4s because they're lighter.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'm
I mean,
lucky to get 3. I can get 3 out of a lead acid, 5 pushing it.
3 hours?
Years
Oh, years
before the thing dies.
Yeah, the thing about lead acid batteries is you can't really use as much as they say in order to get more. I got over 8 years out of my last set of golf cart batteries, and I probably could have made it another year or two, but I just happened to be getting ready to retire again, and because I retired once and accidentally went back to work. But and so I decided, you know what, since I'm working again, while I'm working, I'm going to go spend the money and get some good Lifeboat 4 batteries. And I did that, and I ended up giving my lead acid batteries away. But the trick with the lead acid batteries and making them last, 8 or 10 years is only using about 20% of their capacity. And that's the challenge, right? Because people build systems typically for a 50% draw, because they say, well, lead acid battery, so many cycles at 50%. Well, yeah, but if you only use 20%, they'll last twice as long.
And I'm only using consumer grade batteries. I'm not using golf cart, or I don't know if there's a difference.
Well, golf cart batteries have a hell of a lot more lead in them. Let's put it that way, right? So a 6-volt golf cart battery is bigger than your 12-volt marine battery, bigger, heavier, and it's only 6 volts. So you need 2 of them. But when I bought mine, they were about $90 a battery. And 2 of those at 220 amp hours each gives you 220 amp hours at 12 volts instead of 6. But you can really only use, a third of that to be safe. And that's the difference between Lifeboat 4 and lead. And it's why everybody's going to Lifeboat 4 today. You can technically use all of the Lifeboat 4 battery and not destroy the battery. Now, I will tell you, manufacturers are starting to be honest about it. And they're starting to advertise it too, that you can get 10 or 15,000 cycles out of those batteries if you only use about 20 or 30%, or at least within that 30 to 70% window.
That's what I'm looking forward to with the solar. That's partly why I'm not getting good life out of the lead acid, because in the winter, they get drained down sometimes when we have it 2 weeks when we don't see the sun.
Well, and the other problem with batteries, especially lead batteries, is they lose capacity as they get colder. So if you have a 220 amp hour lead acid battery at freezing, it loses about 25% of that total capacity. At 0, it loses 50%. So it's really 110 amp hours at that point. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize, and they build a system or they use those batteries, and then in the wintertime, they kill the batteries constantly. And it's because they actually have less reserve when they're colder. So that's always an issue. AGM, I started with AGM and then golf cart batteries later. Yeah, I did a cost benefit analysis because I'm a geek on all batteries. And I actually have done a couple of videos now on them. And I have found, both when I was in telecom, because I was in telecom for 30 years, and off grid, that golf cart batteries, if you're going to use lead, dollar for dollar, you just can't beat those, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Keep them warm. Yep. Devil Dog. I retired twice. First time I retired, I got bored, started a new company after 10 years, sold it, retired again. Now I just garden.
I think that's important. Always have something to do when you retire. Have a purpose.
Yep. My stepdad told me long ago, he said, if you want to live long in retirement, you need to have something that you do, your job, something. So he bought 5 acres. And that he figured was going to keep him alive. And I told him one day, well, I bought 20, so I should live 4 times as long. But I retired. I'm technically not retired. I'm not that old. I'm not quite 60. I'm close, real close. In fact, I got a little bit closer recently. But I'm a beat up old jarhead. And so I'm retired on my disability. But and I retired once and then accidentally got a job because when they asked me how much I want, I really didn't want the job. No offense to them. Sorry, you guys were great, but I didn't want to go to work. So I threw a wild, crazy price out there and they said, okay. I went, damn it. Oh, good Lord. Okay. Let's see where we're at here. I was thinking wind DC to inverter, 120 volt to battery tender. No, I wouldn't do that. So I see a lot of people talk about that from going DC to AC to DC again. You're honestly better off going DC to DC. Skip the AC altogether. You just need to get a charge controller that is made to charge that battery with the incoming volts and amps that you're going to get. And that's why I mentioned that little bateria unit. I'm sure Victron and others have those as well. I'm not fixated on bateria at all. Though I will tell you a funny story. I goofed with the little bateria that I got, and I actually thought I blew it up, and I got really mad. Well, okay, let me backtrack. I thought it didn't work, and then I got mad, and then I thought I blew it up. But I finally reached out to them, and I said, what the heck is going on? And they said, no problem, we'll send you a new one. They said, could you send us a video of what you're doing? I said, yeah, sure. So I did. And they said, you do realize the polarity's reversed, right? And the reason it was reversed, so I don't sound like a complete idiot, it's because the connectors that they had, they've got like a connector shaped like this, right? They're a little BC connector, and you take the other side and put them together. Well, their output was exactly opposite everything I had, and I didn't see it. So when I went and I connected my end to it, the polarity was reversed, and I didn't even catch that. I just hooked them together because it was like two plugs that perfectly fit. You plug them together, plug it into a battery, nothing. So when they finally said to me, you realize your polarity is reversed, and I looked at it and I went, how the hell did that happen? Well, I realized what had happened. Their connector is literally reverse of whatever I had. Why, I don't know, but it was. When I reversed polarity, it fired right up and worked just fine. And I was like, thank God, because otherwise I blew $37, right?
You didn't see the magic blue smoke from doing that?
No smoke, nothing. It just didn't fire up. So I thought it was no good. And they were actually very gracious, very nice about it. And I need to go back and fix my review I gave them too on Amazon. I got to remember to do that. But anyway, they were great. So let's see. You got to have a generator if you have solar. I agree 100%. Mississippi Homestead, nice to see you. If you don't have a generator and you're off grid with solar power, then you're just not, you just ain't lived very long with that power then, or you got more money than I could imagine to have, right? I mean, I suppose I've seen some systems where people put $80,000 into their off-grid system. Well, Michael and I, we're just working stiffs, right? I can't afford 80 grand for I mean, I've seen people putting in like $80,000 systems so they can charge up their Tesla. And I'm thinking, well, I couldn't afford any of that. So that ain't me.
That would buy a lot of fuel.
What's that?
That would buy a lot of fuel, $80,000.
Oh, it would buy a lot of fuel. Yes, sure it would. Or better yet, it would buy a small solar system, a nice pickup, and all the fuel you needed to run it. But yes, you need a generator. I'll admit, I went a little bit probably overboard, but when I worked for the phone company, so a little inside information for those that watch my channel, when I worked for the phone company, I was a manager. And I'd taken a new position in a town that was an hour from my cabin intentionally. And they offered to move me to my cabin. So when they gave me the money to move me to my cabin, I used that to buy my Generac EcoGen 6kW generator. So I've got a 6,000 watt generator sitting behind my cabin that's nice and quiet with a massive reserve oil tank that after 10 years, 11 years of running. Knock on wood, it's still running great, and it provides me all the backup power I need. But I will tell you, when I switched to Lifebow 4s, I've got 360 amp hours, so almost 10 kilowatts of reserve power. I actually don't really need that generator to run, frankly, almost ever, other than maybe when I want to run heavy power tools.
That's what I'm wondering. How much storage am I going to have to get me through a couple of weeks of no sun? Because I don't use a lot of power where I'm going to need it.
Right. You dick OV heads just make Earth. Darren, I'm not sure I understand that comment.
That went over my head.
Yeah, that's over my head. Devil Dog, 10 acres, 57. Devil Dog, you are almost same age as I'm 59. So we might have been in the service around the same time. I don't know if Mark is on still, but he served with me back in the day, back in the 80s. Space Mike, here we go. Got a question. Any advice on how I can convince Forest Service to allow me to do light pruning and thinning of small trees, dead wood with hand tools? That's a great question. But I'm going to ask you a question before I let Michael chime in. Where are you? Because honestly, I think it could be different based on regions that you're in. So come back to us. Let us know where you're at. I don't know, Michael, do you want to take a crack at it while we wait to see if
I don't know how you get them to allow you to do it, but I have heard of people who go out on Forest Service land and just do it. One way you can get around it is do it in the winter when you can have a fire. Say you are doing it for a warming fire.
You're camping.
You are cutting material for your warming fire. I've heard that as a technique. How to get the Forest Service to let you do that? The Forest Service, I don't think they're set up to do that.
Yeah, and I'd want to know,
like, on Forest Service land, it involves processes, procedures. I wish people could just go out there and take care of the massive problem out there. But I don't have a good answer to that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, Space Mike, I'm thinking that your question is probably related to what we talked about earlier in Michael's video that he put out. I'm thinking, and I've done one like that too. Gosh, I'll tell you, I wish, outside of what Michael's just suggested, I wish there was a way to do that, because frankly, it is needed. And I'm a proponent of select logging. I think in some cases, clear-cut logging might even be necessary. There's a great article I read just yesterday on Zero Hedge, I think it was, and it was about the forests and about jasper burning to the ground up in British Columbia, or in Alberta, and how those forests there have not been managed at all. And it's a travesty. It's terrible when you see this, because frankly, I've worked some big fires in the communications side where they ripped through and burned everything up. And then I have to go back in afterwards with my crews and try to get 911 working again, right? The devastation is just mind-blowing when you're right there on the ground. The stuff you see is just beyond imagining in some cases, frankly, right? Like even things like cars that are melted because the forest fire is so hot. And I've seen areas that look like bombs went off. Nothing left. You see some tin on the ground that was on the roof at one time, and there's nothing but ash. I don't even, maybe it was an empty cabin. There's nothing there. It vaporizes it. So logging, I think, is the answer. But I think the key is we've got to be, we got to think about it. We got to be smart about it, right? With selective logging in certain cases, I know that the Colville Reservation, prior to the Big Okanagan Complex fire, Colville Reservation had one of the best forestry practices I'd ever heard of. And I'd heard that from multiple people, and it was all based on selective logging. So yes, you can come log these forests, but this is what you can log, and this is what you have to do. And companies that were logging had to clean the mess up. They had to clean the underbrush. And so they had beautiful forests that when fire ripped through, it just ripped right through and continued on.
Well, so, what you said is you have to be smart about it. I've seen where the Forest Service has done thinning, but they took too many trees. And it opened it up, and the brush grew up underneath the trees. And when the fire came, it wiped everything out because they weren't smart about it.
Right. And that's the key. So if you watch my channel, I'm doing a lot of DNR forest thinning, and the forester that I'm working with, I really like him. Smart guy, knows what he's doing, in my opinion, anyway. And it's all about taking the smart approach, removing the trees that are the same age in most cases as the big ones. You might have a tree that's over 20, 24 inches across, and another one next to it that's only 8 or 10 inches across, and that tree might be the same age.
Yeah.
It just couldn't get the resources. So you need to remove those trees and thin that forest out so that you get some separation between the trees. But he's even down to, we can leave these pockets of saplings for the deer and that kind of stuff. So you really you got to take a really holistic view at your forests everywhere, frankly, and understand that if you're going to stop forest fires, then you have to go in and manage the forest, because naturally forests burn. And because we stop them from burning, they just build up more and more fuel until it becomes catastrophic.
Yeah. There are a lot of good foresters in the Department of Forestry. There are a lot of them in the Forest Service, but they're all crippled by regulations they have to follow. I would say go in and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Talk to some of the Forest Service people. Try to run into one who's really level-headed, who understands what you're talking about, and ask them what you can do.
Yep.
Maybe they can come up with some loophole that works in their district.
Agreed. Okay, let me bounce back one more here. We got beat up old Army grunt right on 47 in 2020. Awesome. No debt, sweet mill for my retirement toy. Awesome. What mill did you buy, Jason? And thanks for your service. And then we've got Devil Dog, Avionics, USMC. Keep it simple, stupid. Yes, sir. AC or DC, stick with one. Yeah, so that's basically what I was saying. Same thing. So thank you for that. DC to DC, if you're going to do it, it's easier. SM Aggies, 55. So we're getting a bunch of ages out here. Oh, wait a minute. We got the old man here, 63 with 40 acres. So you're going to live longer than twice as long as me then. Good job. We got Mississippi. Oh, Mississippi. That's hot and muggy. Ohio and Arizona. How are you in both Ohio and Arizona? That's a trick. I do it for free just to help prevent all the competition problems. It's all I really want to do with my time. Are you talking about cleaning up the forests? That must be what it is. I got you. Yes. Okay. You're the one I asked, right? So yeah, I agree. You can come clean. You can come thin mine out for free.
Space Mike, I say thank you for your service. Thank you for doing that. We need more people doing that.
Yep, agreed. Wood permits from the U.S. Yeah, that's another thing. I don't know if you can clean brush, but I guess why couldn't you, right? If you're going to fall some trees for firewood, sure.
That depends a lot, I think, on the areas. Some places they have specific areas where you can cut the wood.
I'm looking through your Amazon list and have the exact HQST 50 watt panel. That must be Michael's list.
I don't think I have a panel on my list.
Do I have a panel on one of my lists? Could be.
I do. I think on one of your videos, I looked through it.
Oh,
and I think you put some components on there.
Yeah, I probably did in.
I might have bought one of them.
Yeah, I think I did for a do-it-yourself power station. I've done it for some of the other stuff as well too. Holy cow, we're already at 7 o'clock, by the way. This is going. It's been fun though, so that's why you.
What I tell you, pop in for a short time.
Yeah, you said a short time. We maybe do an hour. Let's see. Hello, Michael. Didn't know you did live streams. So, thanks for that. That's my fault. You must have missed it early on. But Michael and I were actually from the same area, even though I grew up in British Columbia. We were born in the same town, and we got to know each other. God, I don't know, about 3 years ago, Michael, maybe
less than that. I've only been doing YouTube for 3, and
well, I think you had started. I don't think you'd been doing it long after we started, maybe online, but maybe 2 years.
Probably 2 at the most.
Yeah, so I dragged him out tonight. That's my fault. And actually, it's because Michael said he had some questions on some off-grid stuff. So I said, well, just join me in the live then and let's chat. So there you
Most
go.
of the time I'm on cell service and I have questionable internet, so I haven't got into live stream. But now that I got this, what do you call it, Starlink, that might open up some new
I
possibilities.
mean, you know, once you've got Chuck Norris to throw the stuff up there for you, right?
Yeah, I have to thank him for that.
Darcy loved that, by the
I
way.
forgot about that.
Solar is very intermittent. If we want to see solar in the future as the biggest power source, we have to find a cost-efficient way to store it. I don't think we're going to see it as our main power source ever, because I think that there are so many other potential power sources out there that right now there's this political drive towards solar that maybe is ignoring other things that are happening. So I think solar will always be there. I, for one, love it from an off-grid cabin guy perspective, right? I did it specifically because, one, I didn't want to spend the money to bring in power from the power company and then have a monthly bill. And two, frankly, I don't want them to know I have power. So, you know, but I don't think it's ever, I mean, it is so far from replacing all other power sources that, I mean, I think there's just so many other ways we can generate power. I think it'll always be a component of it, but I think there's going to be others. So, but yes, very intermittent.
From my place where the sawmill is, from February through late October, early November, solar is very viable. But from October through February, it's a problem.
Oh yeah. Well, think about from me, from where I'm at, the sun drops to the trees and it goes across the you know, the horizon. It's almost always in the trees, and it will come up above them. But there are times where I get no float voltage for an entire month or two. And if you're not getting any float voltage, then that means you're really not getting enough bulk and absorb voltage, which means you're not fully charging your batteries back up. And so, yeah, Northern Hemisphere winter is brutal for people trying to live off solar. Been miserable, but at least we're getting rain. Amen. Let's see.
We could use that here.
You're in Michigan. What's that?
We could use the rain here.
We
Oregon
definitely
and Northern California are on fire.
Yeah, it's been tough. 200 acres lost, 300 large pines due to pine needles. Just had 38,000 acre fire with no property loss, plenty of tree cleaning, was searching for use of those downed trees.
Does that mean pine?
Honestly, if you got
pine needles,
it must be mean the pine borers. But burnt trees are good to mill as long as you mill them sooner than later. If you catch them the year they burned, that's best. Sooner the better. They'll be case hardened. Use bimetal blades. I've milled a lot of burnt wood. It's not that much fun because it's black and you get charcoal over everything, but the wood is fine. You get a little bit of case hardening, so cutting through the outside edges is a bit tough at times, but the lumber's fine. But if you leave them standing for more than a year, then when they get into that next summer and the sun hits that black bark, it cooks them, and they're only good for beams at most at that point. Beams or firewood.
pine can make nice blue pine too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Bug killed. I can sell blue pine, bug killed blue pine more than I can sell green pine.
Yeah, I don't sell any, but I've heard that before. Starlink is awesome. You know, my only problem with Starlink is it's expensive. So I'm cheap, I guess, right?
I was talking to someone in town who said they're paying almost that for cable internet.
Yeah, so
$130 a month or something like that.
I just switched. So I used to have T-Mobile's 5G internet service for about 2 or 3 years, $50 a month. But it was really starting to flake out because I guess a lot of people have moved to them, so they're getting overused. So I just switched back to cable, $50 a month for a year or two, 500 meg download speeds. I couldn't see what their uploads were, but I figured it was probably, 10 or 20 megs anyway. And I haven't tested it yet. But I think Starlink's like $125 a month, right?
That's for the stationary version. The mobile one is 150. You can move
Ouch.
around.
So my rule of thumb is if YouTube will pay for it, then I'll get Starlink. So, and for those that don't know, I'm full-time YouTube. I think Michael really is now too.
Pretty much.
And that means that we work, at least in my case, I put in 50, 60 hours a week, no problem, trying to get my videos out, and so I've come to that point as a business decision to say, I got high-speed internet at home, but before I put it in out at the cabin, my channel is going to have to grow a little bit more.
Well, all I had was cell service, and that just wasn't cutting it. So
I don't have anything.
And the Starlink, I agree, it is awesome. What little I've used it so far.
Yeah, solar is great, small scale, but not the answer. Large scale, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I got a still battery-powered long-reach hedge trimmer and a small chainsaw. They're not toys for home use. Still use gas for the weed eaters. Still battery-powered. Oh, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I've got the Echo DCS 5000. I did a video on it, I think 2 years ago. It's a 56-volt battery-powered chainsaw, 18-inch bar, which is really 16 3/4. And I love that little saw. It's a fantastic little saw. It is never going to replace my Husky 572 XP. Not going to happen. Or Michael's big steel. Big chainsaws with lots of power. You ain't going to get battery powered saws to do that anytime soon. Maybe 20 years later, perhaps. But today, no. But for small saws, I love that little Echo, and my wife loves it, and she's scared to death of those big saws. Well, maybe not scared to death, but she ain't running a big gas-powered saw. But she will grab that Echo battery-powered saw and run that all day long. So
I use that new Husky I got all the time now. It's there, and it's what I go to when I need to do a quick cut. But like you say, my 462 XP, it doesn't compare.
Yeah, no.
If I need production, that little saw is worthless.
Yeah, and so is that your main saw?
The 462?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is that a 62cc saw?
462.
Or is it a 70? See, I don't know steel compared to
I can't remember.
Because like the Husky 572, that's a 72cc saw. But
the way steel is set up, the numbers don't make a whole lot of sense unless you
Right.
really know how they work, and I don't.
Right.
I think it might be a 70cc.
I think it is too, but what do we got here? You cannot balance the power grid off solar. Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
I think I've heard it said you
I
need to
saw-
pave over, you need to put solar panels over the whole state of Arizona to power the United States.
Yeah,
Cover the entire state.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So, hey, I don't know who you sub to, but awesome. Thanks. I hope, obviously, I hope for myself, but you should sub to Michael too. I'm telling you, he's got a fantastic channel. I don't BS people. So if you're new to my channel, I'm not going to bullshit you there. I'll just say it. Michael's got a good channel. I wouldn't have him on tonight with us if I didn't think so. So there you go.
I do a lot of BS on my channel, but I think people know when I'm BSing.
Well, that's it. Yeah. You're funnier than I am, though. I'm really not funny. I've never been a funny guy. I might laugh a lot, but I'm not really a funny guy.
Although I think there are a lot of people, I can tell in the comments, they don't understand that I'm joking. I'm a little hard to read sometimes, they say.
I don't. Yeah. There are those that you always get, should we do this? Okay. Put you guys put in the chat right there. See, you want me to go into comments on on here? I will, but you're going to have to tell me to do it in there. So what else do we got? Did you have any other questions here? We're sitting
I had some more questions.
Well, let's get them out here while we wait to see what people think.
All right. When I'm putting batteries together, say combining two in series, do they need to be charged somewhat the same before I connect them together?
Yes. And in fact, with LiPo 4 batteries, whether you're going to put them in parallel or in series, you should have them fully charged and within at least half a volt of each other.
Okay.
And especially with parallel. So the BMSs, that's the battery management system that's built into these batteries. It will manage their usage and charging, discharging and charging once they're together. But you need to have them, and like with my manufacturer, the big batteries, that I have, it's within half a volt. I actually got them within about a tenth of a volt before I hooked them up. And believe it or not, I had a little trouble, which isn't uncommon, and I had to disconnect them all and then make sure they're all charged back up again and then reconnect them, and then they're fine. And that's just the way to go.
A couple times I stopped charging when they hit what comes before float?
Absorption.
Absorption. I disconnected it, then hooked the other one up until it hit absorption. Then I hooked them together. Figured they're probably pretty close.
Yeah, that's fine, because float charges when they're fully charged, basically, and it's just a little trickle charge to keep them warm, keep them active, keep them.
If I have a battery bank of say 4 LiPo 4 batteries and I want to add more, do they have to be the same batteries? Can I do another brand? Is there a way to isolate them if not?
I'm going to tell you that Will Pros would say no, you don't. The manufacturers are going to tell you no more than 4 in parallel or 4 in series, depending on the battery. They're also going to tell you the same battery, same age, same everything. But I know that on Will Pros' channel, he's actually tested those and proven it's not really true. But I'm going to throw this out. If you're going to put batteries together in the same bank, they really should have same voltage, same amp hour rating at least. And the reason for that is it's going to draw off of those batteries. And if you have one that's less than the others, then it may draw that one all the way down and damage it before it ever draws the other ones down. And if they're not balanced very well, you can get damaged because it'll just draw off of one battery or one series of batteries. So you got to be careful, but it depends on what you're trying to do. My advice to people usually is get bigger batteries. If you're really needing to put more than 4 batteries in parallel, or if you have to put multiple batteries in series, then you should really just get bigger batteries. I know that's not the answer you probably want to hear, but that's what I would say. So can you tell me what you're trying to do?
I'm just wondering if later, if I want to add on to my system, if I need to.
So how many batteries do you have now?
I have 4 now.
And are they LiPo 4s?
LiPo 4s, same brand.
Same voltage?
Same voltage. They're identical batteries.
Oh, okay. And you're going to run them. Are you running a 12 volt or 24 volt system?
Right now 12, but I plan on going to 24.
Okay. So yeah, so if you've got 12 volt batteries, you got 4 of them, you run them 2 in series and then run those 2 parallels together, you could then easily add 2 more to each. You could add 4 more batteries. I would add the same voltage, same amp hour rating if it were me. But you could do that. What I would be thinking is there's other ways to do it. So what you could do is you could have separate battery banks with separate inverters and draw off them. Like a lot of people will do that. They'll have more than one battery bank and more than one inverter, but that does mean you got to figure your charging out too, right?
Would you need different charge controllers? Or could
Yeah.
you run those off the same?
Yeah, you'd have to run a separate charge controller and array.
Different panels too.
Yes. Yeah, essentially 2 separate systems. But what you could do is, and that this is an area that I'm not that knowledgeable in, so I would steer you towards Will Pros or somebody like that. I know he does it. I saw a video he did recently where he had 3 completely different battery banks all tied together somehow, and that's what he does, right? So I would, if you don't know that name, look up Will Pros.
I don't. Will
Prose.
PROs.
Prose. Will Pros. He's huge. He's got like a huge YouTube channel. So when it comes to solar power, arcane questions like that, then he's the way to go. Me personally, I would go to 24 volt batteries, and depending on how much power I needed, I'd just get 4 of them or 8 of them or whatever I needed. Or 48 volts, right? You could go like the battery I just tested in my last video. You can put 4 of those in parallel and two parallel series of those in series. So you could have 8 batteries total, right? So 400 amp hours at 24 volts and then twice, put them in series to get 48 volts, 400 amp hours at 48 volts. That is an insane amount of power. You'd be running like dishwashers and air conditioners. I mean, I could run an air conditioner off mine.
Well, I figure if I get an insane amount of power, it will get me through the winter when I don't need very much power.
Right. You only need, what is this? You really need about 15. You really need about 15 what? All right. What other questions you got? I know I kind of danced around that one.
Yeah. I assumed it was the same voltage, amp hours. I was just wondering about different battery companies putting those together.
Yep. What else you got?
I think that's about all I had on my list.
In Sweden here, let's see, in Sweden where I live. So we got someone, oh, thanks for that's in Sweden. Cool. In Sweden where I live, it has become very popular to invest in solar farms on farmland, clear-cut forest. Is this also common in the U.S.? I have not heard of a lot of people doing it. I have heard of some of the areas that are really big into solar doing that, or people just buying them. So we do definitely have solar farms, but I think it's probably less common here, or maybe it's really common where Michael and I aren't at. So we're up in the Northwest where it's not, he's sunnier than, well, I guess I probably get more sun than you do.
Probably in the cabin you do.
Yeah, or even right here.
You're on the east side on both sides.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could out here. There are some small solar farms out here, but I've not heard of people investing in them. And they do take up massive space, right? That's the challenge that I think people don't realize is you start taking up farmland with solar panels and then you ain't making food. Now, one of the things I have seen, which I think is pretty cool, is parking lots where they're roofing the parking lot with solar panels. That's great as long as you're not in an area that gets a lot of hail, which we just had a massive hailstorm in the Midwest. Could have been in Texas, I can't remember, that took out acres and acres and acres of solar panels. So that is one of the dangers of solar panels. And that's why I say they're never going to power everything. They're always going to be viable to some degree, but there's other sources of power that are clean that we can use and stuff we haven't developed yet. So that's just my opinion. But no, I don't really know about a lot of that. Here I would honestly say most of what I hear about is people like us that want some autonomy. Maybe we're a long ways from the nearest power. For me, it would have cost me something like $40,000 to bring in power from the power company, and then I'd have to pay every month. So putting in my own power that they don't even have to know about, that was awesome. That's what I love. I'm independent. I don't want anybody to provide me something. I just want to do it myself.
That's what I'm after too.
Yeah. You see a lot of that out here.
The power company quoted me $30,000 to run power in 15 years ago, probably 2 or 3 times that now.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are now talking about outdoor power sheds. I wouldn't think about putting too much power in a house. Yeah, there's actually several topics I've seen where people, especially the people with big money systems, they're not putting them in their houses because of some of the dangers behind that. I mean, first of all, you put a bunch of solar panels on your roof, which a lot of people do. Firefighters don't like that because now you've got a whole bunch of direct current, which can be pretty high voltage. Super dangerous, right? Like even my roof, I'm pulling let's see, about 35 amps of power off the roof at about 72 volts. If you got up there and something shorted out, you are going to be fried. And so that is one of the dangers. And then the LiFePO 4 batteries, even though LiFePO 4s are much more stable than the old lithium ions are, there's still risks. There's risks with lead acid, right? I mean, I was running lead acid for years. You got to vent that hydrogen gas, and a lot of people don't. Well, if you don't vent that hydrogen gas and someone lights a cigarette, you ain't going to have a cabin anymore. Or a cigarette. Oh, gosh. Believe his name is spelled. Oh, you might be right about that. Thank you. You're probably right. So look
I
at,
wrote both names down so I can find
yeah,
them.
I think that's right. Battery technology will be key. Lithium is not the future for storage of solar collected energy. Definitely works in small use cases, but would never work in the larger grid in the long term. Yeah, you're probably right about that. I know there's some sodium stuff they're working on. There's iron. There's all kinds of things they're working on today. But I think, like for cars, I've been arguing for a long time. I think electric cars are going to be a thing of the past. It's going to take a little while to get there, but I do think they're going to get there because hydrogen is so. They're I mean, Toyota's been racing a hydrogen powered Corolla for at least a year or two now, and they're all developing. BMW's doing it, Mercedes, they're all doing it now, developing hydrogen cars. And with hydrogen fuel cells, I know some of them are doing a hydrogen electric combination where they run both, but like the stuff they're racing, that's straight up hydrogen ICE engines. So I suspect we're going to see that in the future, but that's just my opinion. Let's see what else we got here. The swing for voltage on grid just doesn't work. Do you mean the voltage swing as it's not very stable? I'm not sure what you mean by that. But I'm not an electrician either. So let's see. For small off-grid stuff, works to a point. Solar, I guess, is what you're suggesting. It works great. I love it for my small off-grid. Yes, I do know people with big systems that it seems to work really well. I think they'll figure it out, though, to some degree. But the reality is that we have to have multiple different kinds of power sources in the future as a whole. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Actually, I think that's the smart approach, right? Don't chagrin one source of power. All these different sources of power have their place, and it also depends on the power needs and draws. And we're not lowering our power needs anymore, right? Like people aren't low. Everybody's running around with computers in their pockets and everything else. And yes, guys like Michael and I, folks, I've been running a composting toilet for 15 years now. I mean, I've got a pretty low footprint out there at my cabin, but a lot of that's because I just want it to be simple. But yeah, from a power perspective, you got to have different power sources.
Just like we were talking early, doing solar and hydropower, have multiple sources, makes sense. And then throw in some wind if you're in a windy spot.
Agreed. This one's for you, Michael.
Yeah, I just did one about the Forest Service, how they're managing. And I have a video in the works. I did it last fall, but I scrapped it because the video was rubbish. I'm going to do it again, talking about how timber companies are managing their land and talk about some of the effects of that. I just wrote that down when I saw that. That is a good question. I will think.
Yeah,
about
and have you ever
maybe I can tie them together.
Have you ever driven up through British Columbia?
No.
You know what? I'll tell you what. If you haven't, you got to think about trying to do it someday. It's
Another
amazing.
idea is doing a video about fire and seeing how it affected Forest Service land versus timber company land. I might do that.
That's a great idea. No, I'd love to see
I think
that.
I think I interrupted you.
That's all right.
British Columbia.
No. The reason I asked
I haven't driven through there.
Okay. The reason I asked is just because when you drive up through central British Columbia, the one thing you tend to see a lot of is planted in 1947, planted in 1954, planted in 1983. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are some great examples of well-managed forests, but they're not everywhere. So anyway, I think that's a great video idea.
Yeah. I'll do some version of that.
Now, let me ask you this. Did you work for a logging company?
Never have. Well,
your dad?
I started out working for my dad's logging company when I was about 6.
Mm-hmm.
Just mostly because I wanted to be involved.
And then did you work as a hauler for him or?
Well, I started out pumping diesel into equipment, running the hand pump. That's
right.
At least the story my mom tells. Then I started with the chainsaw at about 14. He taught me how to do that, which my mom was not real happy about, but it all worked out.
Right.
I worked
So
for him
far,
until a young adult, and then just started working on my own.
right? Oh,
Working
cool.
on his property, then bought some of my own, working on my own property.
Right on. Yep.
And I've done other things in between. It hasn't been working in the woods the whole time.
Right on.
But
Okay. Wood
that's
fired.
another video there.
Yeah, you could do one there. Wood fired steam powered electric generator. Yeah. Or how about gasified? So there are people that make wood gas, and wood gas has been around since before World War II.
The
But
problem with wood power and steam is it's easy to make a bomb. You combine wood fire with water, it's dangerous.
right,
But it's a fun idea.
right. So one of the things that one of the big differences between Michael's channel and my channel is Michael has worked in the industry, logging, falling, all that kind of stuff. Whereas the only part of that industry that I worked in is I did work in a pulp mill for a few years after I got out of the Marine Corps. And it's a very different side. You're the end user side of things, really, in that environment. So for me, I got into sawmilling back. I started cutting my first logs in 2010 with a chainsaw. And so, my journey, I've never been a faller, never worked in the woods. So when I watch guys like Michael or Buck and Billy Ray's another one, I see these guys that fall trees that seem to me like wizards at falling a tree. I'm not, and I always say it on my channel. I always say, don't watch me learn how to fall a tree. I've felled a few trees, and usually they go where I want them to go, as ugly as it might look. But that's why I'm always bugging Michael. He's going to come up one of these days and see if he can get this old jarhead to do it the right way.
I have
Probably,
videos about it. You can watch those.
yeah, like everybody else, right? Yeah, but that doesn't get my trees cut down, though.
Yeah, I caught that. One of these days, I'd like to go up there.
Just having fun with you. All right, let's see. Saw difference, Mount Lassen and Sierra Pacific industry land and forest lands. Okay, good. Timber Falling Couple is the YouTube channel. He did a really good breakdown of a couple weeks ago in a video about how the Forest Service has him logged, sometimes laid out the different options that. So there's a YouTube channel called Timber Falling Couple. Okay, and he did a breakdown.
A few times.
Oh, have you? Okay.
He has he continues on the next comment.
Yeah, I was just going to pop that one up. To be honest, he has some good points in there, but the stupidity of it, in other words, that may not be managing it to the best degree when they have loggers come in. I've seen some horrible, look, I'm going to tell you, up by where I'm at, they had some state land that got logged, and they left slash piles up there. Well, I got to tell you, that pisses me off, because that's just a beetle boring habitat now. You want to get a beetle infestation, leave your slash piles laying around all over the place.
Some people call it the forest circus.
The forest circus, yeah. Wade Walker. Hey, Michael and Eric, really enjoy both your channels. Eric, I'm still using the Logrite can hook when I use the mill. Thanks again. Keep up the great. Wade, were you the one that won that cant hook back in, was that 2 years ago? Year and a half, probably 2 years ago. You must be the one. The name sounds familiar. So thank you if you did. That's fantastic. You'll be using that Logrite can hook for another forever. So for those that don't know, when I reached 1,000 subscribers, which was a couple years ago, I got Logrite to give away a sawmill special cant hook. And I think you're the one that won that. Now that you're getting my brain, I'm getting old, so I forget things. But I'm not sponsored by Logrite or anything else, but I use Logrite can hooks. You can't get better can hooks. Sorry, I don't care what you've got. If you ain't got a Logrite, well, you ain't got shit. All right,
I ain't got shit.
You don't. Trust me. Come on up, Michael. I'll let you
contact me and give me one, but they haven't yet.
Yeah,
I'll have to contact them.
The thing is I have a video out there that I did 2 or 3 years ago, and and it's about doing a 17-foot, 34-inch ponderosa pine that was so heavy my mill could not lift it. And I called it Logzilla, and I had to get a reach forklift to help the mill get it up on the deck. And then after I cut the top off, the mill would not roll the log. It couldn't roll it. So I had to get two guys hanging off my 48-inch log right now. Think about the strength that thing has to be to have two men literally jumping up and down and hanging off the end of this 48-inch log right cant hook while trying to roll a 4,500-pound log. And the mill was able to do it as long as they kept jumping up and down on that cant hook, and it never bent either. Didn't bend.
That's more force than Andy from Southern Adirondack could apply, I think.
Well, I don't know. Speaking of other channels, I want to give a quick shout out to Rick and Tim over at Two Brothers Outdoors, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do tonight's show. So it was Rick and Tim that convinced me to do StreamYards, and I got it probably a year ago, but I ended up not ever using it other than when I joined them on their lives. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to try to start using it. So thanks to Rick and Tim for that. All right, let's see. We got a few more out here. Some years ago, I drove through the Hat Creek area right after that fire. That was a giant mess. Where's that one at? Is that down by you, Michael?
It's Northern California, I believe. Is that
Northern
by Lassen or Shasta? Somewhere down there, I think.
Okay.
Could be wrong.
Slash is all they leave in Northern Cal. Yeah, I hate it when they leave slash. If you want to get a beetle infestation, leave slash piles out over the winter into the next spring. Yes, I want that. Awesome. That's awesome. LT15 wide on the ground, or one of the LT15 goes, but that's awesome. It'll outlast you. Then you'll be giving it to your grandson. So yeah, that's awesome. I love to hear that. Timber price for me. So I can't answer that because I don't deal with timber prices. So that's all Michael.
Lousy.
So I'm going to tell you something about timber prices. I was watching, well, it might have even been your video. It probably was your video, and the recent one. And I thought, and I've said this before, you want to fix this problem? I'm going to tell you how to fix the problem. Cut stumpage fees, cut the costs for guys to go out and log, and get specific about, selective logging, or if you're going to do clear cut, where you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. And I'm not talking regulation. I'm talking, come on, let's be honest, as a bunch of people that have land that has a bunch of forests on it, we need to manage those forests better. But the first thing you got to do is you got to make it profitable for the loggers to log, because they're not going to go in there and start thinning these forests out and making them healthier if they can't afford it. And tell me I'm wrong, Michael.
Yeah, that's the problem right now, is there's not a huge demand for lumber. To go into the Forest Service and thin it out is more expensive than clear cut logging. People want cheap lumber. If you want cheap lumber, you have to do clear cut logging and do it as cheaply as possible. If you want to thin out the forests, I think like you're saying, we need a higher price for lumber. It's a matter of get what you pay for.
Well, and I think there's some of the things you can do. Like we ship a lot of logs. At least I know Canada does. They ship a lot of logs to Japan. And the Japanese have argued that they don't like our lumber, so they make it themselves. Well, I'd put a stop to that. No, I'm not going to ship our raw logs out. And I don't know about down here, but up there, they've got really high stumpage fees. And so it's very costly to go into the forest and log at any scale, whether it's selective or clear.
I believe they really dropped stumpage fees when they had all that bug kill. Mm-hmm. Because of that, there was a lot of cheap lumber coming into the United States that the American mills had a hard time competing with.
Right.
And a lot of the American mills went under because of that.
Yeah, it's a battle. It's a tough industry to be in.
As far as myself, I can get a decent price for lumber, but I can't sell very much of it at a decent price. In order to sell lumber right now, I would have to discount it to sell very much to where it's not worth it. Right. Which is why I haven't been doing many sawmill videos.
I haven't been doing a whole lot because, well, right now my tractor's broken. That's a little inside tip to those that watch my channel and haven't seen that yet. It's coming.
The nice thing
But
about timber is you can leave it sit while prices are low, wait for prices to come back. And it just
yeah, I wouldn't
continues to
leave the
grow.
log sit too long, but you can.
I'm
But
talking about standing trees.
standing trees, yeah, agreed.
I can do things like making YouTube videos about things like swatting mosquitoes with sticks.
There you go. Right, exactly. But
No
those
lump.
can be fun though. Although we have these mosquito lanterns that work much better. In Sweden, it's an all-time high $100. Is that a stumpage fee or is that what's the $100 for? Like when I think of lumber out here, or not lumber, but timber, it's you're going to sell it by scale, right?
How do they measure it in Sweden? Is it by ton? Is it by, we do it per 1,000 board feet.
Right. Which $100 per 1,000 would be pretty cheap. I don't think you'd be able to log for that.
The price of logs is actually not super bad.
But wouldn't it be about maybe
lumber is
$250 per 1,000 board feet?
I think it's in the 600 to 700 for Douglas fir per 1,000 for logs.
Oh, really? It's that high?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas lumber futures are trading below 500.
Right. Cheaply as possible, like leaving slash behind. Yeah, we don't want that. I'm going to tell you, yeah, I look at things like Colorado where they had all of that devastation in Colorado. You can stop that beetles. You can stop those beetles. Michael's done videos on it. I have. You can't leave the slash around. You got to get rid of it. You got to thin your forest. That's the problem, right? We don't thin our forests because we think they're natural. If we don't thin them, well, guess what? Then the beetles they can infest it way worse and kill the whole forest. And
it's
then
a combination of things here. It's overgrown forest. It's the slash. We've had really hot, dry summers the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It all combines.
Oh, so by the meter cubed, huh? So that's so how do you do that? Meter cubed. So that's like
meter. So
9 cubic feet or something like that. The cubic
actually
meter.
9 times 3, 27, I think.
I was thinking 3 times 3 because a meter is about 3 feet. Yeah, it's about 3 feet. We're just old hick boys back here in the country in the US of A, so we don't think metric. But we do things
bigger than 27 cubic feet.
So maybe you don't do it by the board foot, you do it by the cubic meter, which would be 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Yeah. So that would be about a little less than a third of a unit of lumber, which would be typically over 8 feet by 4 by 4 or something like that. So that must be what you're doing. You're doing it a meter cubed of either lumber or logs, I'm guessing. So yes, he said, yeah, okay.
When we deal with foreign logs, selling or buying foreign, it's usually in cubic meters.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. That sounds like about maybe 300 per 1,000, maybe something like that, approximately, maybe a little more. I mean, I'm just thinking of 1,000 board feet of lumber is going to measure approximately 4 by 4 by 8, approximately. I'm not going to do the math. And so a meter cubed would be close to a third of that.
I think you're right at a third. It comes out to, yeah, if I did my math right, it's about a third of 1,000 board feet.
Right. So that'd put about 300 per 1,000, 300 M board feet. Yeah.
But when we do, our logs are in long log scale based on usually a 32-foot log. So if you have 1,000 board feet of 32 feet log, when they cut that into 8 feet logs, it's actually a lot more than that because of overrun.
Right.
Because we're measuring on the top diameter.
Yep.
And the logs toward the butt end are going to be bigger than that.
Now, do you typically use Doyle?
Scribner.
Oh, Scribner. Okay. See, like on my mill, I would use International Quarter Scale because that's closest. but I'd actually beat International Quarter Scale production wise.
For West Coast industry, it's usually Scribner.
Is it? Okay. So Doyle must be on the other side.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we are over 2 hours. Michael said he was only going to be here for an hour.
I kind of knew better.
Well, do you have any last questions for us before we wrap it up tonight? And while I'm waiting to see if we have any last questions, I want to put out one more shout out and thanks to Aura. If you're interested, you can check it out at aura.com/the Old Jarhead. And if you don't know what Aura is, I played a little spiel earlier today. They're like LifeLock on steroids. Oh, wait, I'm not supposed to say that. They're like the competitors on steroids. They are they're a identity theft type company, and you get like a 2-week free trial. So because of them, I didn't have any monetizing on tonight's live, and so I probably will just leave it off permanently. It's one of the things YouTube does, and us guys that do YouTube, it's a balance. If you don't monetize, you don't get paid. So with a sponsor, it makes it much easier. So thanks very much to them. And if you want to support the channel, if you're not subscribed, hey, do that. Hit that subscribe button on both Michael's and my channel. But you can check them out. And honestly, guys, we do try. I know Michael does. I certainly do try to keep the commercials down for you. But it is how we get compensated for our time when we put in 50, 60 hours a week. So it does kind of help. But what else you guys got? We've got I'd be happy to answer
I
at
have a
least one
question
more.
for thanks for that. Talking about firewood, crazy demand in Ukraine. Is that because other forms have been cut off, like electricity and oil, etc.?
Oh wait, I
Like
didn't see
firewood
that
demand
here.
is increased in Ukraine.
You talking about this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't. That's a great point. He's saying yes. So, and I'm only guessing it's a he, by the way, because that's what I do.
Look at our stats. They're almost all he's.
Yeah, that's 99% probably. But export from Russia's cut off. Okay. So yeah, I never thought about that. But with power out, you're right. But you would think that would drive the price up, right? Supply and demand. So if the demand for firewood is really high because they need it,
I think they were saying prices are good right now. Prices are up.
Oh, is that what you're saying? Oh, okay. I gotcha. So the prices are good because of that. Mm-hmm. Oh, you said all-time high earlier. You're right. Right here. Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Well, I'll tell you, unfortunately, wars have these impacts. There's a little known depression here in the U.S., and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there was one back after World War I. It was a pretty devastating depression. And the reason, it'll be applicable, the reason is because Europe wasn't growing wheat and things like that. So U.S. farmers started doing it. Then after the war, when Europe finally got back into gear and started producing wheat again, we had a big depression here because you had all these farmers that were mortgaged to the hilt trying to keep up, putting out as much wheat as they could because they were making great money. So in your case, firewood is really great business to be in right now. But when they get the power turned back on, which who knows when that'll be, but when they do, all of a sudden it'll dry up overnight and firewood will be a dime a dozen, right? Just something to think
about. The old saying, make firewood while the war is going.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Make hay while the sun is shining, make firewood while the bombs are falling.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll quit that nonsense and
hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, having been to war, I'd just assume we didn't do those kind of things. So, all right. Any other questions? Did you have any others, Michael, that I didn't answer?
No, I'm good for now. I'll think of more though.
Well, folks, in case I'm going to say we're going to call it. So first of all, thanks, Michael, for coming on. Always a pleasure. Glad you came on. It was kind of fun. My first joint live. So thanks for doing that. And again, one of these days I'll come down. So, maybe I'll help you out with your solar down there. I won't even bring my sawmill so you don't drool over it. All right.
Maybe one day I'll bring my saw up there.
Yeah, well, one day. If not, I got a big saw up here. If you're not opposed to orange saws, I do have a
I
decent orange
ran
saw.
orange saws for years.
Yeah, I know you did. I watched that video. Funny thing is my orange saw always starts within 1 or 2 poles max. Always. Bang, fires right up. And all the guys that have steel saws that I know do the sawmill dance. Till it fires up. And I'm always like, come on, guys. What's up?
I can't explain why we have such a different experience with the same equipment.
I will tell you, and I know I said we're going to cut this off, but I just have to share this. So when I worked in the pulp mill, they were all McCulloughs. And I knew guys that worked in the logging industry. I've known guys that started out as chokermen and worked their way up. And, it was either McCullough or they might be, Steels or Huskies or Dahmers and it all seemed to be who was selling the saws in a given area or which major company was doing the buying and decided to buy those saws. Because my personal experience is Echo makes good saws, Husky makes good saws, Steel makes good saws, Dahmer makes good saws. McCulloughs were beasts back in the day. I don't even think they exist anymore. But, there's lots of great saws. Jones Red, I think they make good saws, right?
I don't know if they still make them or not. I know they were out a few years ago.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jones Red.
Already a Wilson sub, but I will go check your channel out, Eric. Hey, well, thank
There
you.
you go.
The Old Jarhead. Appreciate it. Well, folks, I think we're going to let Michael get back to whatever it was he was doing because he said he would only be here an hour, but we kept him here for 2 hours and 15 minutes. So, thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and hit the end stream. Y'all have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Jarhead out.
Good night.